Hello friends! As you may already know, the upcoming factory automation game StarRupture has been conducting an open playtest of their single-player game on Steam. In any case, I've been playing it for quite a few hours now, and I have formed some opinions that I wanted to share. Hopefully some of the devs will see the video and they'll receive the feedback, but it may well be interesting to others as well. I'd like you to take a moment and subscribe to the channel if you're not yet subscribed. I would very much like to make more videos more frequently, and increasing my subscription count will go a long way toward making this possible. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Now let's get into it. Overall, I think the playtest shows a lot of promise for the upcoming game. I think it's quite rare for companies to hold these sorts of playtests for a single-player game, as has been done here. If nothing else, I think this speaks volumes for the devs' belief and trust in their own product, as well as their interest in their audience's reaction. In my opinion, many games would have simply been released into early access, and we would have been charged for the same thing that we are now getting for free. And that is fantastic. It is very appreciated, and I think it's going to pay off in the end. Now, about the game itself, it's been very interesting and enjoyable to play. I think it manages to achieve its own identity such that it's quickly recognizable and distinct from other games of the type. The music is great at setting the mood, and it helps to remind you that it's a hostile world. The StarRupture in particular looks and feels amazing.
Rapture's core is unstable. Head to safety immediately. The planet is being incinerated.
But it's not all wine and roses, and I do have some thoughts on some things that didn't quite work for me. First, I want to go over some items that I think almost go without saying, but I'm going to say them so that they're not just floating in the ether. Game performance overall needs improvement. While I'm able to run the game at 4K on high and get close to a 30 FPS, it dips into single digits if you're close to your factory buildings. However, it will run at 60 or over if I reduce the resolution or run the game on medium. I chose to run it on medium for the test. I would hope that this would improve for the final release. I've included my PC specs in the description in case they're necessary. There are no options for DLSS and FSR that I could find in the video options. I went looking for these because my FPS was low, and I was very disappointed when I didn't see them. This game could really use an autosave if for no other reason than almost all my game sessions have crashed at some point. My PC is not normally prone to game crashes, so I suspect this is a common occurrence amongst other players. Losing hours of work to a crash can be avoided with an autosave feature. Sure, manual saving can also work, but this is an automation game, right? If manual saving was fine, then autosaving wouldn't be a thing.
Required.
Anyways, I've said my piece, let's just move on. So with that out of the way, let's talk about some game mechanics. The survival aspect, and by this I mean the need to eat and drink and maintain hydration, was a big miss for me. I really did not enjoy this aspect of the game, and I think that there are two primary reasons. First of all, you have to collect thousands of fruits in order to both unlock recipes and also to prepare the items from said recipes. If we could at least do some basic farming right from the start, it would go a long way to making the manual resource collection less tedious. This is supposed to be a game about automation, so why can't food production be automated? Multiple times I found myself starving because I was concentrating on building out a portion of my factory and I had neglected eating or drinking for a while. I would have to stop what I was building and go get food, which, while I guess is realistic, completely interrupts my game flow and was mostly just irritating. I think if eating food is going to be an essential part of survival, I need to be able to get food directly from the factory. Or maybe I'll just have to play a custom game and turn it off. The StarRupture itself is an interesting mechanic and it was fun to play with. it's a bit easier to deal with than, say, running out of oxygen while you go exploring. And I like that if one happens while I'm out exploring, I can quickly build a shelter for myself if I need to. I also really like that there are resources that can only be accessed during the time that it immediately follows a StarRupture. However, none of them seemed like they could be automated. It would be great if part of the endgame was about actually taking advantage of the StarRupture somehow. Having base cores double as cooling towers is interesting. It doesn't feel overly punishing if you exceed your cooling capacity, but you do start to notice it since the game shows you that you're over that capacity. Once you interact with the base core, you can see that it can be upgraded 5 times, which will increase its cooling capacity 5 times. However, cooling towers cannot be connected to rails. Therefore, you cannot automate their upgrade in any way. I have to manually carry resources to the towers and then hit the upgrade button. Additionally, you can't partially fill the towers with resources if you happen to be short. If you don't have the exact amount you need, you'll need to come back with all the resources in your inventory. I appreciate that upgrading towers should be a deliberate act done with intention, but I would argue that working to automate this would also be very intentional and in keeping with the game's core. But there's more to it, because upgrading the tower also requires meteor hearts. As far as I can tell, I could be wrong, the only way to get these hearts is to manually harvest meteors. Each harvested meteor gives you 1 heart and a bunch of other resources. After you automate production of the building material, you don't really need to use resources directly from your inventory. And because manufacturing in the game is demand-based, you also don't generally need to feed extra resources into your factory. Relatively quickly after you start working on level 2, you're able to automate production of basic building material. And once those are going, you really don't need all of these raw resources that you're getting from meteors other than their heart. So I was just dumping everything else on the ground and to free up my inventory. And that didn't feel great. The second issue is that the system feels worse once you start to have multiple base cores. Upgrading a tower from level 1 to the apparent max level of 5 takes 55 meteor hearts. By the time that I was working on filling level 4 orders from the corporations, I had already built 5 towers, and that's only because I was trying to keep my buildings more or less together. Upgrading all of these to level 5 would take 275 meteor hearts. Even if all I wanted to do was level them up to level 2, that would still take me 50 meteor hearts. And in the 7 hours that I was playing on this particular run, while collecting almost every single meteor that I ran across, I only collected about 25 meteor hearts. If I wanted to upgrade all my towers to level 2, I would have to spend a considerable amount of time dedicated to finding and collecting every single meteor heart. And likely I would end up dumping all of those additional resources that you get from harvesting. Figuring out these numbers seriously made me want to start over and build many more level 1 towers and try to not exceed their cooling capacity as much as possible. And maybe that's the point. But because I didn't want to waste the hours I had already spent on my current base, I just completely ignored the cooling limit of the towers, and I have completely overbuilt my factory to the point that once it gets shut down during each rupture, it will not begin working again until temperature goes completely back to normal. In addition, it is well over the maximum upgraded limit of the tower's cooling capacity of 500. I think the mechanic of manually harvesting hundreds of meteors to upgrade each individual tower that you build in the game is overly tedious. I suggest that upgrading the towers should be done more centrally, maybe through a habitat building, and you can affect the level of all towers that you build at the same time. Or there should be a way that we can manufacture the meteor hearts, or increase the number of hearts that you can harvest from each meteor. Ideally, I should be given the choice to eliminate manual work through the building of the factory, rather than increasing the amount of manual harvesting. In any case, that's probably enough ranting about that particular topic. Let's shift gears now and talk a little bit more about the act of building your factory. First, I want to say that overall, I think the building system is intuitive and easy to use. I think it's missing a few quality of life items, such as an eyedropper tool, or even a toolbar that will let you quickly build without having to go into the build menu, because that feels a bit slow. I super appreciate and I love the ability to lock the hologram so that I can look around and ensure that it's pointed the right way before I put it down. But I would also love to be able to nudge the locked hologram in using the arrow keys and the mouse wheel so that I can fix it if it's in the wrong spot when I lock it. One thing that I don't really understand is why the rail posts don't line up properly with the machine inputs and outputs. In fact, the storage depot, the furnace, the fabricator, the smelter, they all have different heights for the inputs and output, and they all seem different from the height that the rail supports run on. The storage depot is impossible to line up with the input or outputs of furnaces and fabricators, since it is 2 tiles wide and its output is right between the 2 tiles. Meanwhile, the manufacturing buildings are 3 tiles wide with their output in the center of the middle tile. I doubt that this is going to be changed at this point, but it absolutely drives me crazy. Maybe I'm missing something obvious, but I found it quite difficult to use all 3 inputs on a furnace unless that furnace is at the end of the line. The inputs are so close to each other that the rails block each other if you want to continue delivering resources down the line. The only way to do this is to lower or raise some of the rails, but because they have a platform built into them, doing this looks a little strange. I rather like that the current build system requires that base tiles are connected to the ground every so often through support columns. I like that you can build support columns and that the base tiles snap around them. However, it's currently not possible to build multiple manufacturing floors to the base, as all machines automatically extend support columns to the floor. But they only build one vertical column segment, so you can't build any machines at a greater height than 1 column height. Nor can you build machines on a second story, even if it's supported by columns that you have already built. In fact, generally I found that building anything vertically was fiddly and time consuming. I found it difficult to build proper ramps or stairs that go over small cliff sides or other vertical terrain features. The last thing that I want to touch on are the exploration and combat portions of the game. I think the world design is very thoughtful and it begs you to go exploring. The way that bugs will ambush you as you explore is a good teacher for the player to be cautious while exploring. I hope and I expect that exploring further into the world, such as into the radioactive area, will be more dangerous than exploring the current area. I also saw that further into the tech tree are gun emplacements, and therefore I expect that these will be necessary to protect your base at some point. The game does a great job on selling you the fact that the world is dangerous. There are quite a few ruined buildings within sight, as well as numerous human corpses that you can find around the area. This danger has not yet shown up in any significant way in my own playthrough, but I certainly hope that there's more to it than bugs popping out of the ground while I explore.
Ah, gotcha.
And that's really all that I wanted to go over from the playtest. In conclusion, I really enjoyed my time with it and I really want more. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.